Yellow, and welcome to the Yellow Chair, your link to the African continent. My name is Nozipho Tshabalala, and what a privilege to finally get to sit and moderate in the Yellow Chair. Of course, mine is blue, but the others are yellow. This is, of course, MTN's flagship thought leadership platform, where leaders' voices convene to talk about some of the stubborn challenges, to toast to some of the celebratory moments, but also to connect around the big and important issues. I am so excited to be sitting with two incredible women today. We are talking to the group CFO at MTN, that is Tsholo Molefe. And of course, we've also got Dr. Leila Fourie. Of course, she is the JSC Chief Executive Officer. Thank you so much for being here and joining me on the Yellow Chair.
Thank you. It's a privilege.
It's absolutely wonderful to be here. And as I walked into the building, I could feel the energy.
It's really difficult, Tsholo. Yeah. There's something that you guys do in the air. I don't know if it's the water, but I agree with you, Leila. The energy is palatable. And maybe that's a really good place to start the conversation, to talk about energy, because if we think about what's happening in South Africa and the continent, we've got some really good energy right now on the back of the G20 and all the other 20s, B20s and S20s. A lot of buzz has been happening in the country. And maybe, Tsholo, let me start off with you. What's giving you energy right now?
Sure, I mean a lot, hey?
Yeah.
I think just firstly being part of the MTN story, I think it gives me a lot of energy. The difference we make in the continent, I think it's very energizing.
Yeah.
I think we are so fortunate as well as a country to have been able to host the G20, the B20 meetings. I think that was energizing in itself. Yeah. So I think that really gives me energy.
And I'm going to push you a little bit because I know Tsholo, the leader. I want to know Tsholo personally as well. It's almost the end of the year. Yeah. I think very few people could say they're not exhausted. What is getting you over the finish line? What does Tsholo do to keep her energy tank up and the fuel going?
Oh, wow. Firstly, I look forward to the end of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a year of lots of travel around the world. I've been to Mauritius, to Ghana, to India and back, to Toronto and all sorts. So it's just been, you know, on the traveling front, very, very hectic and consuming. So I really look forward to, you know, time with family as we enjoy, you know, the festive season. And I love dancing. I truly, truly love dancing. I grew up dancing. Yeah. So I look forward to Christmas parties, to
So
New
you're
Year's
the
Eve
first
parties.
one on the dance floor at home.
Absolutely. They used to call me Duracell at high school.
Ever ready Power Plus. I love that. Yeah. So I absolutely love that. And Leila, I want to bring the same question to you. And I love what Tsholo's done is she's given us a macro sense of what keeps her going at, you know, professionally, but also what keeps Leila going at this time of the year when everybody's starting to think about how they're powering up their batteries.
Yeah. Nozo, I'm in a really positive space, and it feels to me like we're in a 2010 moment.
Yeah.
Except it's here to last. If you look at what's happened over the last month, we were upgraded for our sovereign rating. We were put on a positive outlook, which means this is not the end. We were taken off the FATF grey list. The National Treasury and SARB announced a 3% inflation target. All of those things have culminated in a massive uplift. We've seen almost 5 trillion rand increasing on our market cap from 19 to around 24 trillion. It's a bit less than that, but almost 5 trillion. And all of those things are very energizing and very promising. And at the same time, we're seeing a lot happening on the innovation front. We've just had Optasia listing, which is the largest EMEA Fintech listing in 5 years. And they chose South Africa to list. They were looking at London, they were looking at New York, they chose South Africa. And so I feel very proudly South African, culminating in what Tsholo was mentioning, the B and G20, really has put us on the stage. So I'm feeling that we are now starting to reposition ourselves. We've come out of a 10-year headwind, macroeconomic headwind, and finally, it's South Africa and Africa's time in the sunshine.
And I'd add to that, and the Springboks keep doing
Exactly.
that. Right? It's never been more unbeatable. I mean, some of these games are incredible, but I love that, how you've painted the big picture for us, Leila, in terms of these are the things that actually make us South African. It is the big wins, but it's also the small wins that give us the energy. Talking about wins, Tsholo, I know you don't want to talk about awards and you hate it when we put the spotlight on you like this, but I have to just pause for a moment to acknowledge this incredible feat. It's a long award, Leila, so allow me to go through it for us. You've walked away and been honored with the inaugural Africa Finance Leaders Award for Excellence in Corporate Financial Performance and Growth. It's a mouthful, I get it, but I think it's also a reflection of the size of the job that it takes to lead in an organization of the size that is as diverse as this organization is as well. If you think about that particular award, what stands out for you as a leadership lesson, in particular when people talk about what it takes to lead on the continent? What's the one thing that you say, this is what it takes to lead?
Yeah. No, I mean, thank you very much. Firstly, I was truly honored. I was actually asked to come and be, one of the keynote speakers at the inaugural Africa Finance, Africa CFO Leadership Forum. And I was then, by the way, it was on my birthday, this award. So I was asked to stay over in Ghana, and I had not actually planned on staying over. But, just to also share the stage with some of the esteemed, CFOs in the continent, the group CFO of Access Bank, EcoBank, and many others. We had, esteemed guests, diplomats, ministers and the like. So it was truly an honor for me to be there, sharing, center stage with those professionals. And I think for me, what really stand out is all of us, the work that we do in Africa is absolutely very important.
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, it's not about, driving profits all the time.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, it's about the change that we're trying to make in Africa. It's about empowering people for Africa's growth. And I think, I'm sure we will talk a lot more about that. What really humbles me about the work that we do at MTN is, every day that we connect someone, we give them access to connectivity. Yeah. We're empowering people to learn. We're empowering small businesses to be a lot more, efficient and competitive. So I think for me, under those challenges, and we operate in markets that are truly challenging. Yeah. We are in 16 markets. They are all unique in their rights. The regulatory environment is challenging, but I think knowing that we have global standards for ourselves that can be, implemented across, knowing that we have the strong leadership, in the continent across all the 16 markets. Yeah. And I think we do that very well. We have a very strong leadership team that continuously engage with our regulators, because that is important, right? I think it's important that, when you bring telecoms, even the sectors that we operate with, the banks, the financial services, and the regulators, it's very important that we provide an enabling environment that can make sure that Africa thrives.
I mean, I think I'm definitely going to come back to, the broader question of how are you balancing all of these mandates? Because I'm hearing you talking about not just profitability, but there's a broader mandate. There's inclusion, there's shared prosperity, and connecting all Africans. And I just want to say again, congratulations, because I think it is a big job, and it does take a leader of your stature to be able to pull it off. And I think the recognition is well deserved. Talking about recognition, Leila, I can't leave you out of this conversation, because I was just so excited to speak to you at this point of your career, where the announcement's been made that you're handing over the reins, you're stepping down as CEO. And I would not doubt that you have been asked for interviews left, right, and center to talk about your legacy, and people are pointing to your legacy because your career has been absolutely outstanding, especially what you've done at the JSE. What I'm more interested about is, in your quiet moments, what are you most proud of when you think about what you've achieved at the JSE?
Nozi, before I go there, I just want to congratulate you on the phenomenal achievement I feel incredibly blessed and very proud to be able to sit next to a woman who hasn't only achieved in our country within the confines of our borders, but on the continent. And more needs to be done to celebrate women of accomplishment and success. And so congratulations. I bask in the reflected glory of your achievement. And on my side, there are always many task-focused legacy elements that people like to reflect on. And things like I've built out the return on equity, or I've built the non-trading income to 80%, grown it by 80%. Those sorts of achievements are, of course, great and fine. But at the end of the day, I come back to Maya Angelou's quote, it's not about what you have achieved that people will forget what you've achieved. People will forget what you've said. Yeah. But people will never forget how you made them feel. And for me, in my quiet moments, in fact, since the announcement a month ago, my most difficult moments in accepting that I'm genuinely going to be letting go is in my relationship with the people.
Sure.
Those are my leaders, those are the stakeholders, our customers, our clients who we serve, our regulators, government. And there are so many people that this role touches, and it's been such a privilege to be able to engage. And so I walk away with a tremendous amount of humility. I feel, as Isaac Newton says, as if I've had the privilege on seeing further by standing on the shoulders of giants. I've built on a legacy, and leadership is about stewardship. Yeah. It's about building on what you've inherited, leaving an organization in a better position than when you've arrived. We are at an all-time high in so many things. We're probably the best we've been in a decade. Our performance and our delivery on systems uptime, which is the most crucial service that we provide, is at an all-time high. Our customer relations are at an all-time high. Our staff engagement is at one of the highest, and our financial position has turned around really phenomenally. We're up 75% on our share price since the establishment of the GNU 18 months ago. So the business is in a healthy position, and I feel what's most important is that I've been able to pass the baton to other people, many women, and also others. And what's also been important, when I took this role, someone much greater than me, who's much more accomplished, said to me, gave me great advice. He said he wishes that he had used his role to contribute more to society. Sure. And so I used my role to contribute more to SMEs, to sustainability, to education, and I know that we'll probably touch on those topics, but those are the things that really, really matter. And those are the things that make a lasting impact, both in the country and on the continent.
It's so refreshing, and I suppose not surprising to hear the both of you focus on people and center people in your reflections, even as we talk about your personal achievements and your personal gains. I love, the thought you're bringing to us, Leila, this idea, what we measure is a reflection of what we think truly matters, and Absolutely. That you measure your impact in people is really, really inspiring. As you were speaking, I was thinking about my experience at Harvard Business School last year, and one of the things that one of the professors left with us was that, leadership is actually not about how people experience you only, but it's also how they experience themselves, because they've been led by you. Yeah. So as you speak about that, it just came back to me, and I wanted to bring it into the room. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about some of the hard conversations around the capital markets and the actual core business. But before I go there, I want to maybe come with a quick follow-up, Leila, because I know that one of the things that you've been very intentional about has been about really building that pipeline for women in finance and making sure that they're moving from the periphery into positions of leadership and influence. What still is yet to be done? Because there are still some gaps. there are still some women being left behind. If there was one thing that you wish we could have gotten right by now, what would that be?
So, Nozi, there is a lot that we've done, and education of the youth and empowering women have been a key objective. Yeah. We've grown the number of learners who participate in a trading simulation exercise, which is a one-year exercise, from around 20,000 in 2019 to now 66,000 youngsters, and many of them are young girls participating. We offer a She Invests education seminar, and we have seen 13-year-olds coming in whom I have personally funded to invest on the exchange, and I've just watched and walked their journey with them, and it's been a tremendously uplifting experience. But yet more needs to be done. We've also introduced regulations that require listed companies to report on both people of color and diversity and their female representation. Around my Exco table, we have 70% of my Exco are women, which is really important. And I've been very intentional about identifying individual women and offering them opportunities. Often someone much wiser than me said, if you're ready for a promotion, it's too late. And we women tend to underestimate ourselves. And so it's wonderful to give people a platform and watch them flourish. That said, what are the things that we need to do to improve? There is a lot more that is needed to enable women to start businesses and to access finance. We are doing a lot in the SME space. We have a program called SME Rise, where we are enabling both women and men, but many of whom are women, to access finance, receive coaching, learn about funding roadshows, access potential funding channels. And these are really close to my heart and very important for 51% of the population to contribute economically. And so we are starting to see moves that empower and that introduce females into the world of finance, but more needs to be done. We have at the moment 4.5 billion rands worth of unclaimed dividends. So investors, shareholders own shares that they've forgotten about, or that their gogo or their mother left in their inheritance, and they don't know that they have dividends due to them. We've introduced a new program which we are very excited about, and it's called Claim It, and people can go onto our website and search for Claim It and identify and fill in a very short questionnaire to find out, do they have dividends due to them? In fact, one of the ex-MTN employees who is now with the JSE herself had found out that she had unclaimed dividends.
Guess what I'm going to do after this conversation?
Exactly. So I would encourage people, go out there and find out. You never know. And it's just really, it's money that is unclaimed and due to you. And it's things like that, financial literacy and access channels to finance that are so critical in enabling the prosperity in underprivileged and marginalized parts of our society.
So I want to build on that because, as we're listening to you're speaking about moving some of the big systemic stuff, from a using regulatory levers, big campaigns, but also the smaller things that can move the dial in people's lives. And I want to bring that into the broader conversation of how is MTN thinking about how it leverages capital, whether you see that capital as data or capital as infrastructure or capital as access, to really drive inclusive and sustainable development that not only works for women, but works for all Africans?
Yeah, we're very intentional about it. So we really see digital and financial inclusion as first and foremost our priority. And I think you'll hear us say, we are of the belief that everybody deserves the benefit of a modern connected life, and that we're leading in digital solutions for Africa's progress. I think as we invest in our connectivity, for us it's about providing access to all. And when we invest, it's really making sure that, we invest in those solutions.
Yeah.
And we are empowering either a farmer to get access to markets. We're empowering a student to be able to get access to education and learn. We are empowering small businesses to be able to, thrive in business, in formal platforms. And I think for us, that's what is important. Yeah. So we see, capital investment not just as spending capital expenditure, but really empowering the African nation, because there is still quite a lot that needs to be done in Africa. You'll hear us say we continue to see structurally high demand for our services, because in most of our countries that we operate in, we probably still on average around 50% smartphone penetration. Yeah. Unlike in South Africa where it is very, very matured. So we see that, as an enabling environment for us to thrive. So it's not just about generating returns for the investments we're making, but it's about how do we actually make a difference to those people that were, previously excluded from economic participation, and they now can be, active participants in the economy. So it really provides that, economic growth and development.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that, Tsholo. And I jumped the gun because I was so excited to hear you speak about, what I would imagine is a very important part of your job, the trade-off between balancing profitability and driving the inclusion agenda and ensuring that there's SME enablement and ensuring that you're investing in sustainable infrastructure and getting those right across the board. What is it like to have to sit and make the decisions about how capital is allocated, and what do you think gives you sort of the confidence that I'm making the right call here?
Yeah. And I must say, I think it's a quintessential challenge for any CFO, not just CFO in MTN. Yeah. I think that, firstly, I think it's what, our stakeholders expect of us. I think they expect, obviously, us when we invest, it's not just about profitability, but it's about purpose beyond profitability. And I think what gives me comfort, as I said earlier in my opening statement, is knowing that we are making a vast difference in the African continent. Knowing that you are educating, people that were previously excluded is very important. And it's always I see it more or less of a balancing act and more of a strategic alignment. And I think because when you actually do these investments, you actually, uplifting the economy in itself. You are investing, whether we invest in 5G or we invest in, connectivity, it's actually providing access to all. Yeah. And while at the same time, yes, you could argue that we are making profits, we are generating new revenue streams, but at the same time, we're actually empowering others to be able to be included in the economy. So I come back and emphasizing the issue about, digital and financial inclusion. It is absolutely very important to us. So as a CFO, you've got to step back sometimes. Yes, you are looking for profits, you are looking for generating returns, you want that return on invested capital, but you've got to also, wear the lens of what does it mean long term? What is our purpose as the company? What it is that we are trying to achieve long term? And it's not easy, but you've got to have that mindset all the time. So, and do it in a responsible way.
And to do it in a responsible way, I want to maybe hazard a guess that when the team was deciding that it has to be Tsholo and Leila together, I think there was a shared purpose conversation that we could have. And I want to maybe, Leila, bring the collaboration question to you, and then Tsholo will speak about potential convergence. Leila, do you think there's a role for deeper collaboration between organizations in the financial sector with telcos and maybe even regulators to really build the resilience of African economies? And what is that role if you see the opportunity to do that?
Nozi, there's absolutely a role. And maybe before I touch on that, I just wanted to build on what Tsholo was saying about a social license to operate and inclusive growth. And many of us, from an exchange perspective, 80% of our market cap and our value traded comes from the big end of town, large cap companies. But the growth nodes are in the SME space. We've run a collaboration for SMEs, an accelerator program called SME Rise. I mentioned it earlier. And of those companies, 50% of their revenue has grown by 50%. And their employment, the number of people they employ, has grown by 30%.
Sure.
So if we want to grow this continent and if we want to grow our local environment, there is no question that it's not only a social license to operate, it's an economic imperative.
Yeah.
And we have to find access, technology, pricing that suits and enables and encourages the growth not only of our retail inclusivity, but also our SMEs. So now I come to the collaboration. And there are many opportunities. The work that we are doing on Claim It, which is reaching out to the man in the street to say, hey, did somebody leave you shares and you don't know that you've got dividends outstanding? There is a lot of collaboration that we can do with the telcos. In fact, we do even now do some collaboration with financial institutions and telcos. There's also a lot of work that can be done to provide a tech channel through which the man in the street can trade and engage with the exchange through, for example, MTN. So those provide really exciting opportunities. And then on the SME side, there are many, many incubator collaboration opportunities that we have. So the JSE's vision and our strategy is not about going it alone. We want to go faster, so we have to go together.
Yeah.
And that means we need to partner with and collaborate with others. The telcos and MTN has an enormous footprint across Africa.
Yeah.
You have customer intimacy with all of your customers. How many hours a day do you have your cell phone in your hand? It's your lifeline. And how do you feel when the network is down? Especially if you have teenagers, you'll know how that feels. But the point of the matter is that is a crucial channel to connect with our customers. And the man in the street that uses mobile phones is that same person that trades on the exchange. And so we have an obligation and a duty to make sure that we stack hands and that we use our joint connectivity to the man on the street to create financial literacy, to create opportunities to learn and grow, and to create technology that makes it accessible.
I'm gonna use a different word to collaboration as I bring the question here, a harder word, or maybe a more provocative word, convergence. Because I think sometimes we can collaborate at a distance, which each person sort of stays in their arena and only offers what they think would benefit them in the partnership. But when we start talking convergence, it's a very intentional merging of strengths. And so, Tsholo, I'm keen to hear what you think if there are opportunities to see a deeper convergence between digital systems and financial systems on the continent, and what that would do, not only for inclusion, because I think that's the conversation we've really been having, but what would it do for competitiveness too?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, and I suppose that convergence, that you are referring to, it's really actually on the mobile devices, right?
Yeah.
So it's really about connectivity as well as financial services convergence, because that's where the world has gone.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, but obviously it works off data networks,
Yeah.
which are really the digital highways, of Africa. And I think there's major opportunities for that. And I think when you start with inclusion, for instance, as I said earlier, it's about connectivity. When you provide connectivity to people, people are able to trade, they're able to learn, they're able to do all sorts of things. But then again, from a competitiveness perspective as well, you have businesses that are able to use their cloud services, that are able to use financial services to be a lot more competitive in the formal sector. And I think that, for me, comes together. I think you cannot, obviously thrive in our environment without actually that convergence.
Yeah.
And I think absolutely very important that as we build these, what I call the digital economic highways in Africa, we think about how we enable people actually to appreciate that convergence that come together. So I think for me, those are the opportunities that we really need to, help people to see, make available, to be able to empower Africa's growth and economy. Yeah.
So I love that idea that convergence actually is the currency that allows us to really bring prosperity. So I do want to shift gears a little bit, because I think often in moments like these, we can make the mistake of just erring towards the success story and the positive story. I want to maybe let me come to you, Tsholo, on this, and that is to invite you to share with us if you, as a leader, have actually confronted a setback, but more than that, how do you translate a setback into a breakthrough? And I would imagine that once you've done it once, it then gives you a technology that you can apply over and over again, because the setbacks are going to keep coming. What does Tsholo do when the going gets tough? And how does she take that and turn it into something positive?
Yeah. No, I think as leaders, we confronted, and it's not just, about leaders, but it's about people we confronted with lots of challenges. And I think, for me as a leader throughout my career, I can actually think of a few, but the most humbling moment, and I call it humbling, today on reflection, is what I went through at Eskom through state capture. But I think what was really, really important for me is that in my integrity was very important. And I think what one of my coaches at the time said to me, Tsholo, at the end of the day, all that will matter when you have nothing left is your integrity. So there was never any doubt in my mind that no meant no, and that whatever I was doing, I knew I was doing the right thing. And when you reflect on those things, it actually has built my character, not just in the office, in the corporate world, but also personally, because you then know that, upfront people know what they get, with you. And it's very, very clear that, once you have that, and I think also, the upbringing was very important, because growing up with a father that was very clear on integrity, on, faith, on driving what you believe is right, and never compromising on your standards, was probably one of the contributing factors in how I reacted, during those times. And I carry that in a lot of what I do now today. And I teach a lot of, young professionals that, obviously are thriving to be where we are today, that the most important thing is, obviously making sure that people trust you to always do the right thing, always acting beyond reproach, and it's non-negotiable.
Sure.
I think that's what was important. So those have been some of the humbling experiences for me.
When I think about, as you speak about this moment, I'm reminded of that moment, on your cell phone, it says, restore to factory settings. When everything has gone haywire, your restoration to factory settings is back to your integrity. It's back to the things that make up your character, and back to the basics of your upbringing and who you were raised to be. I think that's really powerful. And Leila, as I bring you a similar question, I know that in transitional moments, as leaders move from one thing to the next, it's also very easy to just stay on the legacy conversation and the successes you've bagged in this particular career. But if you were also to reflect on a moment that might have been a setback, that might have humbled you, how did that moment change the way you lead yourself and maybe even the way you lead others and change that forever?
And it's a wonderful analogy that you use, Nozi, to reset and wipe your hard drive clean.
Yeah.
And my reset to factory settings moment was, without question, over the last 30 years, the COVID crisis. I'd moved from Australia to come and take up this role, and 6 months later, my children were on another continent, in another time zone, and we had lockdown. And that provided enormous challenge to the exchange on so many levels. We weren't able to advance our strategic agenda as we had planned. We had to put in emergency structures to enable an entire capital markets, commodities, bonds, equities to work from home. Of course, the volatility increased the number of trades by more than double. We had record value traded, which means your systems could go down very easily. And through that entire period, what I learnt in myself, in the quiet moments in my home on my own, for 11 months without seeing my children, was a reversion to basic values. And it comes back to what Tsholo was saying. What are those things that you grew up with and that you learnt around the dining room table?
Yeah.
And for me, it was humility, it was deep empathy and respect for the people around me. And what started as a potential extreme disaster in our capital markets environment ended as a resounding success. We had the entire market rallying around, and they sacrificed 2 days of their trading revenues, and trading margins are very thin right now, and contributed that to the Solidarity Fund.
Yes.
And that for me was such a resounding yes from the community around around solidarity, around unity, and around things that really matter.
What is it that
and so
really
that's
matters?
that's I think what I take as I come into land in my career, and shift to a new sort of portfolio career. That's what I'm taking with me. Is at the end of the day, profit is important, delivery of strategy is important, but the most important thing is, have you been true to yourself? What are your real basic values? And have you been able to honor them? Or have you looked the other way when no one else is looking?
So we are headed back to the dining room table that Leila spoke about. So she talks about lessons and the conversations around the family dining room table as we wind down into the festive season and we get to spend time with family. We know what you're going to be doing, Tsholo. You're going to be on the dance floor, making sure that you are the Duracell battery that everybody knows you for. So in true Yellow Chair tradition, I'm going to close us off by asking you, either you can give me actually, give me both. Give me what's on your playlist and what you're currently reading or planning to read during the holidays. So, Tsholo, you look like you already know what's on your playlist. What are you listening to at the moment?
Wow. I love all sorts of genres. So I was actually listening past Saturday, Quincy Jones, Back on the Block. And I played it so many times and I found myself dancing while I was walking. So that's been what's on my playlist. I started reading a book, All the Way to the River. I don't know if you remember Eat, Pray, Love. Oh, yes. Wow, don't spoil it for me, don't tell me. So I started reading the first few pages, and I know that's what I'm going to read over
Elizabeth
the
Gilbert.
Yeah, Elizabeth Gilbert.
Fabulous.
Oh, yeah.
Quincy Jones and Elizabeth Gilbert. So, Leila, playing and reading.
So playlist, I am a jazz fan.
Oh.
And John Coltrane is always on my playlist. And also classical, Shostakovich is very close to my heart. In terms of what I'm reading, I've been very curious about genetic engineering and where that's going. And so there's a book called The Genesis Machine, which I'm busy reading.
Sure.
And then Fareed Zakaria's Age of Revolutions, which is talking about geopolitics, technology, and the seismic changes that we are all sort of in the midst of, and where is that all going? So I'll spend some time on the dance floor, but probably more time on the rock and in nature, and camping with my darling granddaughter, and sometimes sailing. So really enjoying and looking forward to the beautiful summer that the Southern Hemisphere has to offer.
Well, there you have it. From everything from capital markets to genetic coding to leadership to Quincy Jones, to factory resetting, we have touched on absolutely all of it. It's been absolutely wonderful having Tsholo and Leila in conversation with me on the Yellow Chair. My name is Nozipho Tshabalala. Until next time.